Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for this special session on fundraising and proposal writing, as well as learning a little more about careers in that. And I'm Jody Hammer, and I am not your host today, which I'm excited to introduce our two very special hosts that are going to be much more competent on this subject. We have wonderful facilitators. We have Janelle Cavanagh, who's the VP Strategic Partnerships for the Global Fund for Women, who has a wealth of experience in development, and will share her experience and tips and advice, along with our very own Valerie Kurka from the National Peace Corps Association, who is also very experienced and very talented in grant writing and proposal writing and all of that. So they have kindly agreed to facilitate this session that people have really been wanting. And so I'm excited to be here and to learn along with all of you. And what I'd like to do at this point is turn it over to Janelle to introduce herself a little bit more. And then Valerie can do the same, and they'll just go right into it. So thanks everyone for being here. And please do enter your questions into the chat box, because we want to get as many questions from you, the audience, as possible. And I'll be feeding those to Valerie and Janelle throughout the session. So thanks so much, both of you, for being here. And Janelle, go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Great. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see so many names on the screen here. My name is Janelle Cavanagh. I work with Global Fund for Women, which is a women's rights organization that raises money and gives it overseas to grassroots women-led organizations. I was in the Peace Corps in Thailand in '89 to '91. And I've spent since the Peace Corps, and actually in the Peace Corps, I did a little bit of fundraising, but since the Peace Corps, I spent my entire career doing fundraising, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I live in Oakland, California, and I'm going to actually toss it to Valerie to introduce herself, and then we'll start the show.
Great, thanks, Janelle. I'm Valerie. I'm a development officer here at National Peace Corps Association. I'm very excited to have Janelle join us here. She's been, she obviously in our PCV, but has been supportive of our Peace Corps community and kind of helping our team along the way as well. So very much appreciate and hope we can learn a lot from her experience a bit later on. I started off my career I started off in college with a food science degree, and then I did Peace Corps, and then I got an education degree. And like many people perhaps, kind of fell into fundraising. I was coordinating a program, and the grant funding ran out on it. And I asked my employer, I asked the development team if they needed some help, and I eventually got hired, and that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. I went through some trainings, and along my way I went. Development is such a great field because it really enables organizations to do the work that they do. In a lot of cases, it's very critical to their work to find funding. So being able to contribute to that is very meaningful. And that's why I've continued on the path the way I have. A lot of my experience has been in grant writing and proposal writing, which we will get into a bit later as well. Maybe we can start off though. It'd be nice maybe in the chat. I'd actually like a lot of participation here, and hopefully we can solicit some answers and such from you all. If you have some experience, please also feel free to jump in. Development is an art, it's not a science for sure. And there's different approaches, different ways. So let's learn together. So maybe we can just start off. What do you think fundraising is? What is fundraising? You can write in the chat, or you can, Jody, is it okay if people unmute?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're welcome to unmute. If you'd prefer to just say it, that's fine.
So what is fundraising?
It's raising money, right?
Yeah, it is. Anything else? Or development writ large?
Well, fundraising usually is raising money for a specific thing. It's not just general, like you're getting money. It's you're raising money for a specific project or to do something specific.
Sure. Yep. Exactly. You're trying to achieve a goal. Often. Maybe
in
what
the
are
chat solicitation came out. Sorry, Valerie.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, meeting goals, cultivating donor relationships. Fundraising is raising money for a specific cause, and this money you don't need to pay back.
That's right. Yep. All really excellent answers. Thank you. Why are some reasons why we might fundraise? And we've kind of already answered, but what might be some more reasons why we fundraise?
As a 501c3, you can't make a profit. So the only way to like really make money is either to fundraise or to sell goods at a net equal kind of thing.
There you go. Yep. That's an excellent answer as well. Yep. Other reasons might be, or maybe just the action of going through fundraising. You not only raise funds, but you're teaching people about your mission. You're showing people what you do. You're getting the word out. You're telling people why you care about a certain area, a certain goal that you are trying to achieve. What are some of the different areas of fundraising? Where might we seek fundraising or funds from?
So in the chat box, we're getting a little bit here. Amy says corporations and governments. Kristen also said governments. Yes. The community, individual donors.
Yep.
Foundations.
Foundations. Yep, exactly.
Private donor organizations like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Giving circles.
Giving circles.
Good
Yep.
one.
Good one.
Giving
as well.
circles
Yep.
is interesting. For those that don't know, it's like a group of people that come together, have an interest in a specific topic, and pool their money and give it to certain causes. That's great.
That's awesome. Banks.
Thanks.
Banks, it's like another type of corporation.
Mhm. Some
Where-
good stuff there.
Where might universities fall,
Mm.
if they do? Maybe it's separate. It's an option through certain way. They have certain, maybe through a marketing budget, they can sponsor.
Mhm.
Universities usually do write grants, so perhaps you could partner with them and be a recipient of a grant. So there's lots of different ways. So we're kind of getting into it. What are some ways that that organizations or people fundraise? Like, what are some of the methods that we use? For example, like an online giving form. What are some other ways? Annual campaigns, events.
Yep.
Galas, yeah, those are the big events. Events come in all shapes and sizes, small house parties of like 10 to huge at Global Fund for Women. And a few years back, we had 1,000 people at our gala in San Francisco and 1,000 in New York. So yeah, they can be quite big.
I also see grant proposals and plan giving, challenges, like the polar bear plunge for 5K. So thanks, Jody. That's right. Yep. So those might be considered like crowdfunding. You can get little
Yep.
pieces of money from a small group of people to make a bigger donation sum.
And plan giving I see on there from Amy. That's interesting. Yeah, that's, people writing you in their wills, in their estate plans, and there are many different vehicles within plan giving where you can do what's called charitable remainder trusts, gift annuities. There are all sorts of pretty complicated vehicles that you need specialization in to really work on.
That would be fundraising 501.
Yes, for sure.
There we go. Excellent.
And I like this challenges thing. There's also, you can ask anyone, a corporation or an individual, to give a challenge grant. So they challenge you to raise money, and they'll either match it. And there's challenges and matches. Challenges can be to you make a gift just like they are, or matches where they won't give a gift until you give a gift. They'll match your gift, dollar for dollar or 2 to 1 or whatever it might be.
Great. Thanks. Other ways, again, of course, we also the email marketing, mobile text message marketing is getting more traction and getting more popular. I mentioned sponsorships before, but as it was mentioned, I think by Mary here, in the chat. Grant proposals is one way that we can fundraise. So some organizations are completely supported by grant funds, and especially, for example, perhaps in the international development field, many organizations are solely operating on government grants. Some organizations operate largely on foundation grants. Others, it's just a piece of their larger fundraising and development and financial plan. So the USAID government international development world is it's a unique world. It has a lot of nuances as well. I'll be talking a bit more of the foundation side of the domestic fundraising proposal writing side, but these concepts can apply to these large government grants as well. And of course, when we think about our grant proposal, we think about our audience that we just discussed, and, you know, like the governments, the foundations, and how we approach our grant proposal is dependent upon who our potential funder might be. So I'm going to share my screen here really quickly. How does that look? You're looking okay. Okay. Just very basically, a proposal development process. A really great place to start is to define your need or problem. We had mentioned that we raise funds to meet a goal, to solve a problem. So really start with that and understand what you're trying to do. Define your goals, define your beneficiaries, who will benefit. It's not only the organization that's receiving money, and it's not only the program manager who is receiving their salary. It's who are you serving, and what are those outcomes of your activities and what you're hoping to achieve. You do prospect research to fit your goals, and then once you identify an opportunity, you can pursue it, and that could look like trying to find contacts within the organization. Perhaps you have questions on their funding call. It could be maybe refining your program design so it fits into what the RFP is asking for. It could be a whole number of things, but there's partners that you can talk to, and really just refining what your program design looks like. You have the proposal production process, and which I'll go into shortly here. We'll do a short example. And then you do your submission, you submit it on the date, and then you can do a follow-up in some cases. If you get the award, there's a whole award process, and then there's often a reporting process. And these last couple steps are important for continuing funding. Maintaining that relationship with a funder is very important. Communicating with the funder and capturing what you're doing with the project. It's all part of this proposal development process. Some key considerations, perhaps, of course, is a foundation might have a RFP or a call for proposals. It's very important you read that, you follow the directions, you meet the deadline, you submit it on time. It's important as well to match the funder's interest, really understand what the funder is looking to achieve, and see how your program fits into that without changing your program. There is a thing with mission creep. There's something called chasing the money. It's important to still stick with your goals, but you can find a way to, you should find the funder that matches your goals, and also be able to communicate how your program matches that funder's goals. Oftentimes, if your argument, you can present your argument logically. If it's presented well, it helps communicate what you're trying to achieve. If the approach is based on data and experience and best practices, that's often helpful for a funder to see. So it's not just a new idea that you have. If there's experience and you know that you'll be able to achieve the goals that you say you will, that might be helpful for a proposal. And then mentioned before, focus on the beneficiaries and meeting their needs. So parts of a proposal include, and this varies, it depends on the RFP, but in general, you have a summary section, an opportunity to talk about your organization. the ability to define the problem and what you hope to achieve through your goals and outcomes, and how you're going to achieve it through methods, activities, how you're going to measure through evaluation and a monitoring plan, and then how you plan to sustain your program. And then there's often a budget that you have to do along with the proposal. So we start with, to start a proposal, we have a design. And these are some basic questions that we can ask ourselves, and we can actually go to an example here. Jody, am I missing any questions in the chat there? How we doing?
I don't see any questions, so you're all good.
Great, excellent, thanks. All right, everybody, here.
So sorry, I was on mute there.
No
there
problem.
was one that just came in that says, can you expand more on prospect research? So whenever you want to hit that, it's great.
Sure, and actually, I think a good time to do that will be after this example. But
Great.
I'll definitely be, yeah, please remind me if I missed it, Erin. Thank you. So you all can join me in this document if you'd like. It is a Google Doc, so if you don't have a Gmail address, you can just also type in the chat here, and I can make some notes. But the idea here is to try to go through this together and put together a really basic proposal real quick. So yesterday was Earth Day, and a lot of people do trash cleanups on Earth Day. Trash cleanup is an activity, but it's something like, ooh, I want to do a trash cleanup. Let's unpack that. Let's figure out what that might look like as a grant proposal. So I'm here in DC, but this of course can apply anywhere. I've defined our problem for us. It's 6,000 pounds of trash pollutes the Kingman Island area of the Anacostia River in Washington, DC each year. And I took this number, data is always good. I took this number from a news article I saw based on a trash cleanup that they had last year. So if this is the problem that we're starting from, what does it look like when the problem is solved? So you can either write in this document directly if you're joining me here, or you can type it in the chat, or you can shout it out. Trash free, yes, exactly. And again, there's no right answer, no wrong answer. It's an art. Like if we have a problem of trash in the river, what does it look like when we don't have a problem?
Megan shares in the chat box, there will be less trash polluting the river.
Great. How much less trash? So I see animals, people aren't affected by it daily. That's what it looks like, yep. Long term.
And I see in the chat at least 80% less trash.
Great. Someone added in 6,000 pounds less trash, excellent. Can't control for everything, that's true, very true. So to say 100% reduction in trash, that's a very hard target to achieve. But it's possible. But 80% might be more realistic, especially in a place like Anacostia with many water, many places for water to flow in and for trash to come from.
I think that's a good point, though, whether you make your goals achievable or whether you make them not very difficult to achieve. And I think it really depends on who your funder is. Many funders want you to learn and want you to shoot for the moon and are fine with you saying you want 100% less trash and you only get to 80, and some funders will think, well, you didn't meet your goal, so what are you doing? So it's really important to get to know your funder and what their interests are in setting your goals.
Excellent point. Excellent. Goes back to the relationship, of course, relationship building with the funder. Yep. So great. There will be 6,000 pounds less trash polluting in the river. Actually, maybe let's do the 80% less trash. Great. So the next step, why is this problem important? Why do we care about why is trash in the river a problem? So the trash harms wildlife. Yep.
And I think in fundraising, while people are writing, it's really important to recognize that people give from the head and from the heart, right? So the head is a lot around this 80% less trash in the river, and the heart is around it harms wildlife and the ecosystem, which I see here. So really balancing between the head and the heart. And again, knowing your donor, you know, a bank or a big funder, a big foundation might be more interested in the numbers, and individual donors might be a little more interested in the heart and the why is this problem matter.
Great point. Yep. Well, I see that trash harms wildlife. It affects the ecosystem. It enjoys people's enjoyment of the river. I see perhaps that's, yep, BIPOC. So a good question, depending on your funder or, you know, what your interests and goals are, is who is most affected by pollution. These are very relevant questions. So excellent. And it can just be a whole list. It can be many reasons why there's a problem. And then or why the problem is important, excuse me. So what causes the problem? What are some reasons why there might be trash in the river? Lack of effective trash management in the area. I see, yep. And runoff. And Jody says lack of knowledge about negative implications. So maybe some, could you explain a bit more of that, Jody, actually? Or just.
Sure. Yeah, no, I meant like a lot of times I think causing the problems, like not knowing. I just think back to when I lived in Ecuador, and like I did a lot of, you know, work around, you know, trash, and it was kind of this, well, so what, like what, okay, so there's a yellow, you know, salty papa bag that's, you know, on the side of the whatever, how does that really impact? There just wasn't that awareness of, okay, so this goes into the river, and then the river harms the fish who eat it or ingest the glitter that's, or whatever, and then we eat the fish. And, you know, so it's that whole, like, there's a concept of just not realizing that it's really an issue, other than the, like, oh, it doesn't look so nice. There's not that issue of, oh, this is a health issue too.
Excellent. Yep. Good point. Okay. And then what are some possible solutions to the problem? And I don't have it all on one page here, but let me try to work this. So possible solutions. And really a way to look at this is when you're looking at the solutions, look at what causes the problem and what can you do about that. Or when you look at what the problem is solved, what needs to be done to achieve that. So education, I see education campaigns, neighborhood cleanups. Installing trash cans, information boards, kind of gets at Jody's behavior change suggestion. Involvement from the community is important. Excellent. You all are full of solutions. This is great.
Even advocacy, you know, against the problem is a solution too.
Yep, there we go. Lobbying congressman. Yep.
There you go.
Definitely. Yep. And specifically here in DC, the DC government just started a program where they're offering free canoe rentals, but it's free. And then if you bring back some trash, so you can go enjoy the river if you do some trash cleanup. And there's advocacy days, trash cleanups as well. So going back up to the top here, quickly, what you can see up here for, what does it look like when your problem is solved? This is your objective. This is what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to solve your problem. So SMART objectives, perhaps many of us have learned it in Peace Corps. If you didn't, Google SMART objectives, SMART goals, SMART learning objectives. Why is this problem important? Long-term effects. This is how you match your proposal to your funder. You make sure you want to help them achieve their goals and what they're trying to achieve. And if you can show why your program matches what they're what's important to them, that will help achieve a strong proposal. What causes the problem just helps you identify solutions to the problem. So, and these are your different activities that you can do. If you want to enlarge the scope, you can, do like a huge advocacy campaign, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and catch them all. If you just want to get rid of trash in the park and do a cleanup with your friends, that's awesome. That's an awesome solution. And you can shrink the scope that way. So there's just different levels you can do, and it also depends on your funder. So, so thank you all for participating in that. So you have your proposal, and then as I was preparing for this, I don't actually know of a funder for this. So I can just walk you through my quick thought process, and then we can move on to Janelle. But so what I did was I Googled, can you see, oh, can't see me yet, here, hold on. Okay, I just Googled environmental justice cleanup grants foundations. And I went through, there's a bunch of federal grants. I don't want a federal grant. So I just clicked on this link here, 17 environmental grants to fund your project. So I just scrolled through this. Being in the field, you kind of get a sense as well as things. So Bill and Melinda Gates is, they're huge. They're not going to want my little project. Maybe they would, but they do international things. Bloomberg, kind of, Rockefeller, maybe. But I got down to here. And where did I get down to? Oh, New York State pollution. So now let's pretend we're in New York. But it's, this can apply anywhere. So if I was in New York, this seems really great. I just scanned really quickly here. I opened it up. I looked at the funding. Am I eligible? There's nonprofits eligible, sure. Funding sources, where they get their funding from. And then I just took a glance at what, if this kind of matches them, and if so, then I'm going to get into more prospect research. So I look at their past funding. I look at what kind of the levels of funding that they do, their past grantees. I might look at who's in their organization, but especially focus on their goals and what they're trying to achieve. So that's a quick overview of proposals. And we can, happy to take more questions. We can take questions at the end, but now, especially for me, but many of us too. There's the development world is so huge. I'm just starting out learning about individual giving. Janelle has an entire career of individual giving experience, major gifts, campaigns. So very excited to learn a bit more from Janelle, and kind of focus more on the individual donor side and what she's achieved. So maybe Janelle, you can just start us off. Just tell us about your career path and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Valerie. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I've been in development for probably almost 30 years now. And most people I find fall into fundraising. They're working for a nonprofit. There's a hole in the organization in terms of something that needs to get done, and somebody jumps in to help with a fundraising project. And if they're good at it, then their bosses recognize it, and then they pull them into fundraising and development. So I feel like that's the way most people fall into it, which truthfully, I think it's great, although what it causes is people in fundraising that don't get some education around it, learn around it, and then if they're not successful because they haven't learned about it, they hop to another profession or another place. And so in our field of fundraising, you'll see kind of a lot of hopping around. But people I find who start out, they're good at it, they begin to get an education around it, then they love it, and then they are like hot items, sought after for many organizations. And I find that in fundraising, often the fundraisers get paid a little bit better than program people because of the market, right? That it's really hard to find a fantastic fundraiser. So if you like it, it's a great career. I fell into it really actually in the Peace Corps. I did what was called TEFL crossover, teaching English as a foreign language and crossing over into agriculture projects. And I did about 7 agriculture projects in Thailand, and I had to raise money for them. Many of the funds I got were through the Peace Corps, but some were not. They were like local corporations, and I ended up doing a water irrigation system for the school through a big European company that was basically in the community. So that was my first experience in fundraising. And I came back to the United States, and I was a counselor for it's called SED, seriously emotionally disturbed adolescents. And I did direct service, and I found that that was not my passion. That was not, I mean, I think I was fine at it, but I wasn't inspired by it. And I found myself in the organization doing more systems work and doing, you know, like trainings and things like that, because I wasn't as inspired by doing the direct service. So I ended up going back to school. I got my graduate degree from UC Berkeley in Master's in Social Welfare with an emphasis in management and planning. And through that, learned a bit more about fundraising, started really liking it, did my internships around fundraising. And then my second year internship was with United Way of the Bay Area, which for those you probably know, but that's a big fundraising entity, right? And is mostly through employee giving. And so I actually started out doing kind of the grant making, so taking the money and giving out to the community. Truthfully, for me, that wasn't as challenging. So when I kind of slipped into doing more of the fundraising, I loved the goals. I'm a competitive person. I love the kind of competitive part of it, and ended up switching over to the fundraising side at United Way, and became, after I was there, say 7 years, became head of their major gifts department in the San Francisco Bay Area, and working with individuals who were major givers, donors who were giving over $10,000 a year. I really got inspired by that. I really find donors super interesting, and many of them are, you know, amazing, fantastic philanthropists. And my job was to introduce them to amazing programs in the community. And so I just felt inspired by both sides. I got to meet these leaders in the community who were doing fantastic work and introduce them to these major donors, make this connection, and raise money. And so I found that really exciting, and then focused a little bit more on women and girls. I worked at Girls Incorporated of Alameda County as their chief development officer for many years, and then found my way to Global Fund for Women, which I've been at for about 8 years now, and started out doing, again, major donors, which was, you know, working with these amazing philanthropists and introducing them to these women overseas who are just rock stars. And to be in a room with kind of a rock star activist from, you know, many different countries to pretty great rock star philanthropists was a fun place to spend my day. And then I got promoted into being Vice President of Strategic Partnership, which leads the team. And we have about 12 fundraisers at our organization. We have about 44 employees. And we do all types of fundraising. So anything from what we call the annual fund, which is our donors who give under $10,000, which is kind of our online giving. We do direct mail, which is just kind of mass mailings. We do acquisition mailing, where we buy lists and mail people and email people about our work. And we have corporate fundraising, we call institutional partners, which is like big foundations, Gates, Kellogg, MacArthur. We do government grants. We haven't really done much US government grants because of the past administrations haven't been very inspired by our work, let's just say. And also just, because we are pro-choice, it narrows down who is interested in our work. But we've done a lot of work in governments like the Swedish government, the Irish government, the French are really kind of progressive in their funding. And so we've been successful at that. I think that's, I hope that answers, Valerie, the question around kind of my career path. It really started out as direct service, found out that wasn't my passion, and really liked kind of the competitiveness and the excitement and the people around the fundraising.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm also struck by how diverse you kind of walked us through the different ways that you have raised funds. And it's not just asking somebody, it's not just, getting on the phone and asking for money. There's a whole, there's many different ways. There's strategic plans behind this, and it's very diverse. So I kind of touched on this before too, but I'm curious to know, and you also touched on it too, but why development? Why might someone consider a degree or a career in development? And what skills and dispositions help make people successful?
Yeah, I think people would be surprised at how creative fundraising is. Like a lot of times we're helping create the program, but also in working with a donor, you have to really listen. I mean, that's the number one thing I think in fundraising is really listen to the donor and their interests, and matching that with your work. And sometimes it's, kind of how you think of your work. It's still the same work, but you have to flip it how you describe it, or find pieces of the work that really match this donor. And so it's very, you have to think on your feet. It's very creative process. So people who are interested in, being creative in that realm, it's a great career. Obviously, it's working for a nonprofit, so it's showing you care about your community, and anybody who is in the Peace Corps, I think, has already shown they care about communities. I do think there's something too in fundraising that it's a sales position, right? So you have to think of it as sales too, and so there's this kind of competitive aspect, goal-oriented. You got to like the challenge. I think that's a really important kind of skill or disposition. And I think that you really need to stick to it to be good at it. I think that as you start, it can be really awkward and uncomfortable to ask people for money. And some people are really uncomfortable asking people for money. I personally, I don't even find myself, this is going to sound strange, but I don't even find myself asking people for money. I talk about our programs and I'm so inspired by them and the work we do that then the donor usually says, I want to give you this much, or how much can I give you? Or, like, well, how much money do you need for that? So, if you really are a good fundraiser, you've created that relationship, you've worked it over time to where, they say that when you do your prospecting, you should look at, are they interested in your topic? Do they have access to resources? And are they philanthropic? Because people can have access to resources, but they aren't charitable. And I don't even mean to knock people that way. That's not what I'm trying to say. One of my best friends is very wealthy. I would never ask her for money. She's not philanthropic. That's not how she's built. And I love her to death, but that's just not who she is. So are they interested in your topic? Do they have access to resources? And are they philanthropic? And if you have that and you begin a relationship, you will get 80% of the time yeses, 20% you'll get no's. If you don't do your work and don't have a relationship and don't do your research correctly, you're going to get 80% no's and 20% yeses. And that's a hard way to live your days out, right? So I think it's really important for people to get an education. take a risk in fundraising. People always ask me, well, how do you train to be into major gifts fundraising? And I'll say, you start with a lower level fundraising and you get in there and you try it out, so that, if you as you are finding your language skills around it, because you have to find how do you do your pitch, what's most comfortable about it, then, if you get no's as you're working with the, say, $100, even $1,000 donor, that's fine. It's when you get to the 20,000, you want to be kind of experienced enough to kind of feel comfortable with it. So you're more likely to get that 80% yes. So I think that kind of describes good skills for fundraising.
Yeah,
Can I
thank you.
jump in here for a second?
Yes.
Janelle, there's a question that goes right with this. It was, how do you build that relationship? You're talking about the importance of relationship building. How do you do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really researching, knowing your donor. Like when you get a meeting, it's, often you start with your list at your organization. So you have donors. And if you have a donor giving you $1,000, $5,000 without you having a relationship with them, I can pretty much promise you they can probably give 5 times what they're giving, right? They don't have a relationship and they're giving you money. So getting that, they're interested in your work. So starting out by getting that relationship. I think that's really key, listening to them. And then once you find their passion and their interest, it's finding the way to articulate your work in the way that matches their interests. Does that answer the question?
I think you might be muted, Jody.
So sorry. Thank you so much, Janelle. Yeah, that absolutely. That was just one of the questions that came in the moment. So it made sense to address it. And we have a good number of questions that are coming in. So keep them coming if you have them. We still have, I think, about 16 minutes left. And there's some really good questions. Valerie, would you like me to ask the questions of you all, the ones that are coming in the chat box?
Sure.
Or do you want to cover something else first?
No, go ahead. I was just going to say thank you, Janelle, and those are really excellent points. And I think I'm in a position more or less starting out with the individual giving aspect. So I get on the phone with people I don't know, but we have that Peace Corps experience in mind, and I love the work that NPCA is doing. So I just speak to it, and so it comes out. And then you just over time, some people get really turned off by that. They don't want to talk to you again, and that's okay. But others are open. They want to hear what's going on. And if you do your research, things just kind of happen. And that's been great too.
And I think that in building relationships, a lot of times, I don't come from the place of asking them for money. I come from the place of helping them meet their goals, right? So that helps create a relationship. So I send them articles. Just recently, I was on a call with a woman. She's a philanthropist in England, and she's interested in one of our projects, but our project hasn't started. And some work we don't do, but that she's interested in, is mass incarceration. And so when she said that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I happened to later that day get an email from a donor inviting me to a webinar that she is doing, or she's involved with, she's funding, on mass incarceration, which is, again, not our work, but she invited me because we have a relationship. And so I forwarded that invitation to this donor in England and said, hey, one of our donors is sponsoring this. You mentioned that. And she's like, this is great. And so here we are starting a relationship, right? So I'm helping her meet her goals, not just being, I want to say, selfish and like, give to us. I think that donors earn trust by you listening to them and helping them meet their goals, whether it's through your organization or not. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time helping her look for organizations to fund on mass incarceration, but as things come my way, I'm going to show her, like, you can trust me. I'm not just out to ask you for money for us. I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to try to help you. And then that creates a really great relationship.
Great. And Valerie, can I go ahead now at this point and maybe ask the questions of both of you? We have so many good ones that have come in, and keep them coming. Absolutely. Sarah shares a really good one. I'm sure it varies, but I've heard development jobs can sometimes have poor work-life balance due to events and relationship building. What has been your experience? I'd love for each of you to answer this from your own experience.
Sure. I'll start. So it's a complicated answer, but I personally feel there's two reasons that for work-life balance problems. One, this is all about me now. One is my personality, right? And what I want to do. And two is whether I have a supportive boss or not. And if when I create my own boundaries, I do well with work-life balance. I'm fine working late at night, going to an event. If, you know, the next day, or for me, I try to do within that week, I take that time for myself. I also, as a manager, really support this. So when I see an employee has to work late, I make sure that to say to them, even though I do tell them, because most of them are at a level where take responsibility for your own boundaries. Like, I am encouraging that, but I need you to do it, right? Because I think that when there is a bad work-life balance, a lot of times, like when I felt just worn down and whatever, I realized it's me, that I want to do it, right? It's my personality. I'm competitive. I am, you know, and my boss isn't asking me to act like this, do this, but I am. But as a boss, I want to also make sure I'm encouraging that work-life balance. So it's totally manageable if you are managing your own boundaries and you have a boss that is helping you manage your boundaries or just encouraging you to.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Valerie, do you want to add anything on that?
No, I loved hearing that answer. Thank you so much. But I think we can.
Okay. It seems a pretty comprehensive answer. That's what it's about. You want to love what you do and set your own boundaries and then have a boss that supports you. So great. Anne has a really good question about what have your experiences been if and when you haven't been able to meet your fundraising goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that too is around your relationship with your boss and the board and good explanations, right? So, you know, you have a when you start the year, you put together a strategy. And then we do fiscal years that start in July 1 and end in June 30th. And usually in January, I do a real thorough look at where we are and what's happening, because the heaviest grant gift giving is in December, right? At the end of the year. And that's all around just people's patterns, but it's mostly around taxes and trying to get some working on your, before you work on your taxes, that you give charitable gifts away. So in January, I look at, you can call it a run rate. Over the past years, what have I been raising and where am I at this year? And if it's low, if it's bad, I start looking at my strategy and I start shifting, right? And I make sure that the team knows what the shift is. And I usually have only like 3 priorities. You know, like we could probably do, you know, a million things throughout those last 6 months, but I keep going back to remember our 3 priorities. Remember what where the gifts are coming in. For us at Global Fund, 80% of our money comes from individuals that give over, say, $25,000. So I start saying to the people who are looking at the $10 gifts and $1,000 gifts, like, don't focus there, focus here. Like, this is where we all have to funnel our attention, because that's what's going to get us the funding. So it's really important to be looking at your strategy, to reassess and pivot when you're going low, and communicate or over communicate with your boss and the board. Like, I'm seeing this, I'm getting nervous, here's what's happening, here's my recommendation, do you have any other recommendation? And I also put a little pressure on the board. The board is responsible for the fiscal health of the organization, and they should be out there fundraising for you. And what are they doing and how are they helping you? And I found one time I was on I was actually sitting on a board. It wasn't the organization I worked for. And somebody said the fundraising wasn't doing so well, and somebody said, well, you know, what are staff doing? And another board member said, what are you looking at staff for? What are each one of you doing? This is the board that's fiscally responsible for the organization, and we're responsible for this, how this, and I wanted to jump out of my seat and cheer her on. And that's the right attitude of the board. And so, you know, making sure you're kind of managing up to your board too, training them and having them understand the responsibilities that everybody shares.
That is great. Janelle, thank you so much. And Valerie, do you want to add a little bit to that? Did you have a couple comments you wanted to add?
I think being flexible is really important. There's as I had kind of mentioned before, I believe it's an art, not a science. And so, especially this past year with the stay-at-home orders and the people's lives just changed dramatically. And specifically at NPCA with the evacuation of Peace Corps volunteers, even we started a new program and brought Jody and Dan on board. And we had to pivot really quickly, and we adjusted our fundraising strategy to reflect that. So if you're not meeting your targets, yeah, as Janelle said, you just take a minute and see where you can adjust.
And thank you, Valerie, for making global reentry possible from a very selfish standpoint. I love my job. I love working with RPCVs. So thank you. The next question, Valerie, I'm going to have you start this one because you talked a little bit about pivoting and transferable skills. The question is from Jill, and it says, if an open position is looking for experience in fundraising, what are some transferable skills that you could leverage in a cover letter or resume if you don't have a lot of direct fundraising experience? That's a great question, Jill.
That is a great question. And I think I'll also rely on Janelle to help with this answer too. But I think definitely we perhaps both mentioned the relationship building, just an ability to show that you can create relationships, whether it was with previous coworkers, maybe you're doing volunteer work. Listening is important. If it's a proposal writing position or grant writing position, or even just fundraising writ large, I mean, being able to communicate and written or verbally, orally is very important. And I think I'll turn it over to Janelle.
Great,
I
Janelle.
Yeah, I think those are all great. I guess I would say, I would articulate ways you've inspired others to do something, and probably in your Peace Corps experience you have that, but being able to move people from one kind of place to another, inspiring them to do something, is really important. And then also I would say storytelling is a really important aspect of the job, being able to really tell a great story that motivates and inspires people. So those are the two things I would add, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There's another good question that Sarah had submitted. She said she was interested in hearing about the employee experience at organizations that are primarily financed by fundraising or grants. It seems like this could create some uncertainty for budget and operations. What should someone expect in terms of stability and job security with such organizations?
Yeah, I think it's good. So all of the organizations I've worked for, the money comes from, the majority of the money comes from fundraising and grants. I mean, other money would come from income, kind of fiscal sponsorship, things like that. Is very little. So I have been at organizations where, we, for whatever reason, didn't meet our goal. And really what I found, and then we've done things like we've had to do layoffs. It is tough in nonprofits all the time. But I think one of the things I really learned was to really set a budget to one goal and then have a stretch goal. And I think that's really important. So for example, at Global Fund for Women, if we typically raise $20 million, but I'll be honest with you, this year we're going to raise probably almost 55 million. So last year and the years before were 20 million. This year we've had a banner year. Well, I'm not going to set my goal and budget to 50 million next year because it was a banner year, right? And so I hate to say this, but I don't have faith we're going to hit that mark again. I want to, and I'm going to try to, and it is empowering to feel like we can get there again, like we've done it, we can do it again. But my budget, where my spending is going to be 20 million. Because for the last 5 years, we've hit 20 million. I'm comfortable with 20 million. I'm going to budget everybody against 20 million. And I might tell the board I'm going to hope for 30 million. And my goal is 30 million. But I'm not going to set financial budgets against it, because that's where instability happens and things happen. So.
Great point. And Valerie.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll add, I mean, I've also been at rather stable organizations. People who give tend to give again. So you, as Janelle said, she has like a number that she can really rely on generally. In other organizations that might have cycles of grant funding, you can see it might be a few years ahead of you, and you can kind of plan in that way. But if, on an individual level, as a fundraising professional, your skills are transferable across many types of organizations. So, if there's a lot of pieces that go into successful fundraising, it's not just the person in the, making the phone calls, it's an entire team, it's your value proposition, it's many pieces. And if for some reason that doesn't work out at one organization, your skills are they're almost, they're so transferable to another organization, and there's so many causes out there that people can get on board with. So whether it's geography, or there's a lot of virtual fundraising happening now too. So
yeah, talented fundraisers will always have a job. They'll be hot, sought after. You would never be unemployed long.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And goodness, I realize that time flies, and we are coming up on the hour. So I want to definitely respect your time and our listeners. I guess to close out, I would love if you, Janelle, and you, Valerie, could just maybe give what would, like, any final tips, 1 or 2 tips or advice, little morsels of advice. You've already given so much, but to people who are interested in potentially exploring fundraising, proposal writing, development, that area, if you have any final advice on that, or tips on, writing, bringing it to the next level and making a really great proposal, either one.
I guess I'd say, a tip would be to try to enjoy it, like to try to find a way that it doesn't feel like it's sales in the negative way sales is, and to take a risk, to take a chance. I found that I didn't feel comfortable with it until like finding my story. It's almost like, when you learn another language and the Peace Corps, your tongue has to move another way. Finding that way to speak about something, you kind of fail at it a couple times. And so taking that risk to be okay with, like, oh, I did horrible now, because it'll only get you to the point where you're like, okay, I'm good at this. I got this. This is now how it works. And so I would say take the risk to try it and find the way to tell your story.
Great. Thank you. And Valerie, you're going to close it out
Thanks.
here with final words, tips, advice.
Okay, great. So here are just a couple resources collected, but there's many out there. There's free resources. There's also courses you can take. But a lot of the learning I've done has actually come from my supervisors, from people, and just being curious. So I guess what I would leave you with is to just be open to learning and offer help, and just be a sponge. We can share these out after as well. So just thank you all. RPCVs have so much to offer the development world. So thank you for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for being here. And a special thank you to our 2 guest facilitators, Valerie and Janelle. You both did a great job, and it was just really an honor to be here with you. Thank you so much. And everyone have a great weekend.